The regular season is finally done, and it's time for the playoffs. Now, just because the Rangers are in it doesn't mean there aren't a bunch of rooting interests. I'm going to take you through all the former Rangers in the playoffs, and the Rangers made some changes to their pitching coaching staff. All that and more on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On the Texas Rangers. I'm Bryce Patrick, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan, the founder and host for all 4 seasons of this Locked On Rangers podcast. Today is Friday, October 7th, the first day of playoff baseball. I'm recording this about 20 minutes before that first game throws out the first pitch. Thank y'all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. You can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers and subscribe on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to first off hit that subscribe button pretty please, and to comment any single thing below. We're going to get into some Rangers coaching changes, a little bit of news out of the Arizona Fall League, and of course some playoff previews and picks. But first, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before, because BetOnline is where the game starts. Now, let's start with the most Rangers-centric news. Less than 24 hours after the Rangers season was done, they made some changes on their coaching staff. They're not going to be bringing back the co-pitching coaches Doug Mathis or Brendan Segura. Those guys will not be back. Segura will be offered another position, more on the pitching development side in the organization, which seems a little weird. It's not necessarily these guys' faults. I really don't think. They seem to be fine pitching coaches. I didn't really know them all that well, but there was just not a whole lot they had to work with. Obviously, that was the big problem with the Rangers this year, was the pitching. So they are making some big changes. A few weeks ago, they parted ways with Jeff Andrews, who was the longtime Frisco Rough Riders pitching coach. There were also some other changes throughout the organization. Josh Johnson, who joined the Major League staff in a role after Woodward went away. He is going to go back to player development. There have been some other changes in, I believe the AAA staff is also making some changes, but none of these guys were hired by Chris Young, which is what matters, and so Chris Young is going to want to go make his own hires. A lot of the other coaches in the organization, they are offered roles to stick around, but it's going to depend on who the next manager is. By the way, I believe it's today that Tony Beasley is going to be officially interviewed for the open managerial position. The Rangers did not do super well under him, but again, that wasn't as much his fault. They were 17-31 after he took over as the interim manager. Really like what I saw from him. The players really like him. He's been in the organization for a long time as a third base coach, obviously very beloved. Remember that moment where Martin Perez had his complete game shutout in Houston, the only one he had this season, and he dedicated to Tony Beasley after finally being cancer-free after dealing with that for all of those years. A really, really special moment. One of the best moments of the season, honestly, and the players love him. He is not afraid to, speak harsh truths with these guys and be open and honest. And I think he did a good job with the situation that he was in. And I don't know if the Rangers are going to hire him, but I would be really bummed out if he is not in the organization in some capacity. Also, there's usually just a lot of coaching turnover when you hire a new manager. Usually they want to bring their guys in. And I think it'd be a real bummer if the Rangers lost the hitting staff that they had, because they made an impact. I know some of the Rangers bats weren't doing as well as they wanted, but I think they should get major props for the offensive explosion that was Nathaniel Lowe this season. Like, they really, really helped on that. I mean, bringing in Donnie Ecker was just absolutely huge. We saw Nathaniel Lowe was one of the best offensive players in all of baseball this season, and especially in the second half. He was really right up there in among the very, very best hitters for the entire second half, and even that month of June as well. He was just absolutely electric. Jonah Heim had a great, great breakout year. It ended up being a little bit too much for him to carry this heavy a workload, but in the first half he was all-star caliber. He was absolutely fantastic. And Simeon, I mean, we know how rough it was for him to start the season, but for how big of a routine guy he was, I know it was really, really tough being in this new place with a heavy burden of I just made $175 million and I got to freaking live up to it. And he really did. After he got that first home run off his back, he was, again, one of the best second basemen in all of baseball and still finished the season, even with that horrible first 2 months, as one of the best hitters, but one of the best second basemen, I should say, in all of baseball. And Seager achieved some career highs. Granted, the average and the on base weren't nearly as high as he wanted them to be, but he blew his previous home run career high away. Just absolutely shattered it. Saw some great moments from Leo Taveras. Saw Adolis Garcia take another step forward. And again, I think the hitting staff is solid, and the pitching coaching was fine. But I think making changes in the lower levels and the upper levels of the minor leagues, I think that was the right move, because even though I don't know if it was necessarily Jeff Andrews' fault or any of the other pitching coaches, but there was some real stagnation with Jack Leiter. There was some real steps backwards with Cole Winn. Don't exactly know what happened there. I'm hoping that it's just like a one-time thing and he can kind of figure out his issues with all the walks and never throwing the strikes. Both of those guys specifically. But some changes needed to be made, and I think they both respect that. Hope they both have long, fulfilling careers and can go find a job elsewhere. But real bummer that it didn't work out with those guys. But just some real quick news out of the Arizona Fall League. There was no other second start for Kumar Rocker just yet. I think it'll be next week when he makes his second start. Don't know if he's just going to be on a one-inning outing kind of limit. Hoping that's not the case, but we'll see where it goes from there. But Luis Angel Acuna only played in 3 games, but already has his second home run. He is just one shy in 3 games of the total he hit in 37 games in Frisco. Now, it doesn't really tell the entire offensive story of what he did in Frisco. Did put up some really nice numbers there, but cool to see him hitting really, really well in the Arizona Fall League against some of these top prospects. There's really not a whole lot of guys who aren't very heralded that are being sent there. Like, these are all guys who their organizations want to get good looks at them. Only 6 teams, and the Rangers are on a team with 3 other teams, which is just such a confusing concept of a minor league, kind of team of being comprised of literally 3 different team systems. But it kind of shows how highly they thought of him. He only played in 91 games this year. Still did get 409 plate appearances. But the Rangers, I think this really shows a sign that they are really eyeing him, really want to see what they have in him. Had a great year in Hickory. Offensive results weren't quite as much there in Frisco, but you could see what they saw in him. He was 20 years old in Frisco. Like, he's doing really well given his age at that level, putting together some really good at-bats and helping Frisco win a championship. That was a really nice moment on the season. But speaking of championships, it is time for championship baseball. We're going to look at every single team. Every single team in the postseason has one former either Ranger at the big league level, and one team does have a former Ranger, did not make it to the big leagues with the Rangers, but was a draft pick and a prospect in their system. We're going to get into who those teams are, who I'm rooting for, and who I think is going to win it all. But first, this episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your #1 source for football betting info this season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game you can find. Even clunkers like that Thursday night game last night, or the Thursday night game that's going to be next week. I didn't watch any of that Thursday night game, and I feel much better off for it. But if you want to watch some Thursday night games, make some bets on it, or if you want to make some playoff bets on some of these guys, you want to take don't use my information that I'm providing you on this episode to make your bets. Don't hold me accountable for your betting habits, but I'm going to try and get you the info you need to, if you do bet, make some very informed decisions. You can go to BetOnline. It's the fastest and easiest way to get all your favorite games and events, including Major League Baseball, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to betonline.net or use your mobile device to learn more, because BetOnline, it's where the game starts. Now, this is the first year of the new system, the new playoff system, which I didn't bother learning until just before the playoffs, because I didn't think the Rangers were going to be in the playoffs. And it turns out I was right. Because the Rangers are not in the playoffs, and they were not in the playoffs by far. But there is one thing. I did have a tweet kind of pop off last night dunking on CBS, which kind of pissed me off. And I kind of wanted to talk about that really quickly. CBS Sports, yesterday at the end of the season, they tweeted out a picture of Marcus Semien looking sad, taking his hat off after presumably striking out. And they said, money spent on free agents prior to the 2022 MLB season. The Texas Rangers, $580,700,000. The 7 other teams to finish with 94 plus losses in 2022 combined, $509,250,000. So the Rangers spent 71 and a half ish million more than them, which I think is stupid. I think it's stupid to tweet that out without context. The Rangers, so I responded and said the Rangers payroll ranked 15th at $161 million. Marcus Semien paid $25 million, had a 5.7 B-WAR, which was, I believe, second among all Major League Baseball second baseman. Seager, $33 million, 4.1 B-WAR. Yeah, he kind of dipped down a little bit, but they spent only $4 million on Martin Perez, who had a 5.0 Baseball Reference WAR. Like, this team had a lot of issues to rebuild in one offseason, and dunking on teams for spending money is stupid. It's stupid, and I don't know why people do it, especially major media outlets. Like, you're doing the work for these cheapskate owners who want to point and laugh. It's the same reason why people want to point and laugh at the San Diego Padres and be like, see, that's what you get for trying. My team didn't try and they still lost, so I'm going to point at your team because it's funnier that you tried. No, screw that. Screw that. Baseball is about freaking trying. I'm glad that the Rangers spent $500 million in a single offseason. If they spent $500 million in another offseason, maybe then they would get into the top 5 in payroll for one season. But they didn't just spend it on one season, and framing it like that is stupid and negligent and a dumb tweet by CBS Sports. So, yeah, they deserve to be dunked on. Really crappy tweet and really crappy framing. But there are some other former Rangers in the playoffs and some rooting interest. Like I said, literally every single team has at least one former Ranger. We're going to go through all of those teams. There are 3 different teams that have 4 former Rangers. One has 4 former Rangers players, including a guy who was in the minors with the Rangers, never made his major league debut with Texas, but he is still, I believe, on their postseason roster last time I checked. But we're going to go from east to west, AL to NL. That is just the way I'm doing this because that's the way my brain works. Starting unfortunately. We're going to start with the New York Yankees because the Yankees actually have 3 players. You might know Jose Trevino, Isiah Kiner-Falefa, but they also have Alberto Abreu. You might remember Alberto Abreu because he was the one that the Rangers received in the trade for Jose Trevino, and he could not stop walking players to save his life. Then he went on to Kansas City, where he still could not stop walking players to save his life. And then magically he ends up back in New York, and he figures out how to stop walking players and how to stop giving up home runs. He allowed 2.1 homers per 9 in Texas and Kansas City both this year, 12.5 walks per 9 in his 8 2/3 innings with Texas. But it goes back to the New York Yankees, 3.16 ERA in 25 2/3 innings, 0.7 homers per 9, 2.1 walks per 9. Isn't that nice for him? Good for you. I'm sorry. It bothered me seeing that last night, doing my research to write the article on the Dallas Morning News. Go check out my Twitter. Please click on the article to just please. Anyway, that just bothered me. And now it's going to bother you. Toronto Blue Jays, they have former Ranger great Anthony Bass, spent 64 innings through 64 innings in 33 games in 2015 with the Rangers. They also pitched a little bit in 2017. This year, he started the year as an elite member of the Miami Marlins bullpen, then was traded to Toronto at the deadline, where he has been a big part of their bullpen as well. There are 3 former Rangers on the Tampa Bay Rays, including Corey Kluber, former Coppell High standout Jeffrey Springs, who has just blossomed into an amazing Major League starter this season because, of course, mediocre Rangers reliever turns into amazing Rays starter because that's just what happens. Good for him. 30th round pick, even making the big leagues, did pitch pretty well in a couple of seasons with the Rangers. And, of course, Pete Fairbanks, who was a member of that infamous Pete Fairbanks for Nick Solak trade, which has been pretty darn one-sided. But the Rangers at least got their revenge with the Nathaniel Lowe trade, it seems like. Now, Cleveland Guardians in the Central, who won the Central and are playing in this new format. By the way the new format works, if you are the top 2 teams, top 2 division winners, I should say, in the league, then you get a bye in the first round. The first round has the worst record of a division winner versus the third wild card. Then the top 2 wild cards play each other in a 3-game series. So the Cleveland Guardians are playing in this first round. They have Emmanuel Clase. Of course, another Corey Kluber. Remember that trade? That worked out really great. It's fine. It's fine. I'm fine. 102-mile-an-hour cutter. That's it. That's all I'm saying. Houston Astros do have former Ranger Rafael Montero, the guy who figured out how to throw a 2-seamer and then became a really darn good reliever for the Rangers. Cool. Still hate the Astros. Good, happy for Rafael Montero, but still hate the Astros. This is the only team without a former Ranger big leaguer on their squad. That is the Seattle Mariners. They have right-handed pitcher reliever Eric Swanson, who is having a career year, a former 8th-round pick by the Rangers, who was in the Carlos Beltran deal to the Yankees. I don't remember what deal sent him back to the Mariners, but he has been absolutely fantastic. He has faced off against the Rangers before and been really darn fantastic. Now, let's move on to the National League. But first, this word from our sponsors. So, the National League, starting in the East with the division winners, the Braves, who were tied with the Mets, but on whatever the tiebreaker was, I believe it was head-to-head record, and that final weekend series of the regular season was the Braves and the Mets facing off. They have 38-year-old Jesse Chavez, who is, still in the big leagues and, pitching fairly well. He went to Atlanta, won a World Series with them last year. He didn't start there this year. I think he started with the Angels and then ended up in Atlanta. Now, the Mets, they have left-handed pitcher Joey Rodriguez, who was part of the Joey Gallo trade, then re-signed with the Yankees in the offseason, only to be traded to the Mets in, I believe, January. But before the season started, he has been on the Mets all season. He's been, fine. Philadelphia Phillies, they have Kyle Gibson. He pitched a lot of innings. He had an ERA over 5. Probably not somebody the Rangers are going to want to target. But if you loved Kyle Gibson and his time here with the Rangers, then you can go cheer for those pesky Phillies. St. Louis Cardinals, they have Miles Michaelis, the 2014 Ranger who went to Japan and ate bugs or crickets or whatever the heck it was. I think lizards. That's what it was. He was eating lizards. Total weirdo. Very, very good pitcher. But if you're like me, then you probably hate the Cardinals for all time and refuse to cheer for anything good for them, even for Albert Pujols and Yadier Molina's final season in Major League Baseball. The Dodgers, they have 3 former Rangers. You might know Joey Gallo and Hanser Alberto, the besties that are finally reunited and, making some wholesome social media content for the Dodgers and for my heart. Very beautiful moment. But they also have former Ranger reliever Chris Martin, the Arlington High School standout, who is back with them. He started the season with the Cubs, but he has been excellent with the Dodgers, 24 2/3 innings with the Dodgers this year in the regular season, and he had a 1.46 ERA. He was not nearly as good with the Cubs, but he really, really blew up and dominated with those Dodgers. Now, the Padres, this is the team with the most. They have 3 players who played for the Rangers in the big leagues and 1 former Rangers prospect who is very near and dear to my heart, and the Mr. Walk-Off, that is Jorge Alfaro, who was in the what trade was that? Cole Hamels trade to the Phillies, then went to Miami, and now is with the Padres. He has, I want to say, 6 walk-offs this season, including a walk-off walk. He was just Mr. Walk-Off, Mr. Clutch for them. He is not their primary starting catcher. That is Austin Nola, but he has been very, very helpful for them. They also had Nomar Mazara for a time. He is not going to be on the playoff roster, but the 3 former Rangers in the big league level, they have Jurickson Profar. They also have Darvish as well, and Nick Martinez, who is back in the big leagues after spending several years in Japan, remaking himself. He was a combined starter / reliever. He had a 3.47 ERA and over 105 innings this year with San Diego. Pretty darn good team, pretty fun, scrappy team. Again, if you like teams that try and do things, they also have AJ Preller, the former Rangers assistant general manager, and Hassan Kim, who, by the way, who I wanted several years ago, just little surprising fact, Hassan Kim was the second most valuable according to Baseball Reference on this team, just behind Manny Machado at a 6.8 Baseball Reference WAR season. Hassan Kim had a 4.9 B-WAR season. And Yu Darvish, really great season after a mixed bag last year. Made the All-Star team last year. This year had a 3.10 ERA in 30 starts, 194 and 2/3 innings. The only time he has pitched over 190 innings since his time in Texas. 2013, actually, back when he pitched over 100 or over 200 innings for the first time in his career. But he was fantastic. Maybe Rangers target Sean Manaya is on that team. I don't know if they're going to target him in the offseason, but he is a starting pitcher who the Rangers could look at going and getting. They cannot get Joe Musgrove because he was locked up to an extension, and he loves his hometown San Diego Padres. So bummer the Rangers won't be able to get him. But if you like guys who are former Rangers, it seems like the teams you are looking for are the Dodgers, whose hashtag is win for Vin, which is really wholesome. So yeah, it's hard to root against playing for the memory of Vin Scully, and hard for me to root against Hanser, Alberto, or Joey Gallo. But I think my primary rooting interest is going to be the Padres because, again, they tried things. They are fun. I love Jurickson Profar, who has a career-high 3 Baseball Reference WAR this season. Love some of Yu Darvish, and happy Nick Martinez is back in the big leagues. Also, Jorge Alfaro, the first professional baseball player, or first minor leaguer, I should say, that I interviewed in real life. So, little soft spot for him there. But I'm going to put those feelings aside and make some fact-based picks. I think the game is actually, the first game is actually starting right now as we speak. So let's go through these wild card matchups really quickly and look a little bit down the road. First matchup is going to be Tampa Bay versus Cleveland. Then in the other wild card series, we have Toronto versus the Mariners. Toronto is the higher seed there. Then in the National League, we have the division-winning Cardinals versus the Phillies, who just eked into the postseason to end a, I believe, 7-year drought? Several year drought. It was wild. It's been a hot minute. Then in the other series, which is absolutely bonkers to me that this is a wild card series, but the National League is really darn good this year. That's right, we have the Mets versus the Padres. Padres, with an 89-win season, did not win their division, and I believe were, 89 wins, and they were how many behind the Dodgers? The Dodgers had 111. So, yeah, a lot behind. 22 games behind the Dodgers at an 89-win season. That's absolutely bonkers. So those are those wild card matchups, and let's see. My picks, where do we go? Okay, there we go. After the winner of Tampa Bay versus Cleveland is going to face the Yankees. Winner of Seattle versus Toronto is going to face Houston. Then Mets Padres is going to face the Dodgers. Woof. That is a rough road. Then the winner of Phillies Cardinals. I don't know why I blanked on Cardinals there looking at St. Louis, is going to face off against the Braves. So let's make some picks and some reasoning. Cleveland versus Tampa Bay. I think Cleveland's going to trounce them. This is a team of 2 very, very good pitching staffs, but Cleveland just hits the ball really, really well. They've got several very, very good offensive players. Stephen Kwan is a guy who, if you're not familiar with, he just does not swing at pitches that are outside the strike zone. He does not swing and miss. For his first 50 swings or something like that in the major leagues this year, he did not have a single swing and miss. He is the prototypical on-base machine. Decent left fielder, very, very valuable player. Jose Ramirez signed to an extension this year. They have Shane Bieber, who is really darn good, and the rest of their pitching staff is really good. And they got a really good bullpen with a guy who throws a 102-mile-an-hour cutter. It's fine. I'm fine. But I think Cleveland's going to win pretty handily there. Toronto versus Seattle. I think this is going to be a really, really difficult series. But I trust Seattle's... I don't know. I trust their bullpen more. I trust their starting pitching more. I trust we haven't been to the playoffs in 21 years, and we're not just here to, show up and get knocked out. We are here to do some freaking damage. The Blue Jays just have not had it this year for whatever reason. They have a really, really darn good team. This is going to be a fantastic matchup. I cannot wait to see it, but I think Seattle is going to come out victorious, and Toronto is going to be really, really pissed off about it. In the National League, I think that the Phillies are not going to be able to do enough to get past this Cardinals team. I think it's going to be a slugfest of the series. These are two of the best offenses in all of baseball, but I think Seattle or St. Louis, gosh, so bad. Just hate the Cardinals so much that I'm forgetting how what city they're in and everything about them. But I think the Cardinals have just enough pitching to get past them, and they will win that series. The Mets are just going to Mets it. I'm sorry to the Mets. They're a really darn good team, but this Padres team is really darn good as well. It would have been really fun if we got to see a certain Fernando Tatis Jr. in this series, if he was able to get back and healthy and didn't have PED suspension, trying to get back in rehab from his injury a little bit faster. But looking forward to seeing Juan Soto in the playoffs with the Padres and Manny Machado doing some absolute damage. Now, in the second round, I think Cleveland is going to take over against this Yankees team. Cleveland's starting pitching is so darn good. They have a really, really deep lineup. Not as much star power, but I think this Yankees lineup is not nearly as deep as we thought it was at the beginning of the year. Granted, that's what happens when you trade away Joey Gallo and he's kind of terrible, and you're relying on, no offense to Jose Trevino and IKF, but you're relying a little bit more on them than you should. They do have some talented rookies that if they decide to give them some more starts, we saw that in the series against the Rangers, that they've got some of those talented rookies that can play at the major league level, but I don't know if the Yankees are going to trust them enough to start them in a postseason game, even though they should, even though they're ready, and I think that would make a difference. But I think Cleveland wins that one. Seattle, I think, makes it past, and then I don't want to pick two upsets and just picking with my heart, but I don't care if I'm wrong. Seattle passed Houston. I think that's what it's going to be. Seattle has a really, really deep team. They have a lot of belief, and I just don't like the Astros. So I don't care if I'm wrong on this one. I just don't like picking the Astros, even for one series. So in the second round, I think Atlanta and the Dodgers are just too darn good. I think they're both going to win their series pretty easily against St. Louis and the Padres, and we're going to see Atlanta and LA again in the NLCS, and then we're going to see Cleveland and Seattle in the ALCS. I think it's going to be Cleveland that goes to the World Series, and then I think it is going to be the Dodgers. This just has an incredibly deep team that goes to the World Series. Cleveland versus LA. I'm going to give the edge to the Dodgers. It feels so chalk to pick the Dodgers. It really does. But it doesn't feel that much better to pick the Braves either. Go back to back. I mean, they do have Matt Olson, who is really darn good, and it seems like their offense is even better than last year. They have Ronald Acuna Jr. No. Yes. Ugh. I feel bad. No, I'm going back on it. Screw it. Sorry, Joey Gallo. No, Joey Gallo. Gosh, this is so difficult. You know what? Screw it. Dodgers. Got the Dodgers over the Guardians. Joey Gallo gets his first World Series, and I'm upset about it because it's not with the Rangers. Yeah, I didn't feel good about it either, but I don't feel good about anything else. I didn't want to pick the Mariners in the World Series. That just feels too storybook. It just feels too storybook. I mean, win for Vin, sure. Dodgers are just so stupid good right now, and it's not fun. But Joey Gallo, if you like him still, or if you hate him, then you can root against him and choose everyone against him. I don't know. I don't feel good about it. There's a lot of really, really great pitching matchups in this postseason. I think this wild card round is going to be really, really fun. More fun than we've seen some other first rounds in a while. I do like the expanded playoffs. It does cheapen it just a little bit to have so many teams in there, but hey, I am never going to be mad about more baseball and a better chance that the Rangers can sneak into the playoffs next year. It's going to be a lot of fun. Hopefully the Rangers can go spend, maybe less than $500 million, but go get themselves an ace and another starting pitcher or two, bring back Martin Perez, and see themselves in the postseason next year, because I would like to podcast about my team being in the playoffs next year. Maybe year 5. We can finally do that in year 5 of this Locked On Rangers podcast. That's going to do it for this week's editions of Locked On Rangers. Go check out Locked On MLB. Paul Francis Sullivan, please call him Sully. He gives you his unique perspective on the major leagues, both past and present. He talks about postseason and gets some input from the hosts all around the network. That's going to do it for this last week of the regular season. And until next time, don't forget to enjoy baseball.